That night in Paris, when Ibrahim Traoré saw the woman sitting across from him in the restaurant, his heart stopped. It was Marianne, the woman he had separated from 15 years ago. But the message on the woman's phone changed everything. Target located. Begin operation. The lights of Paris glittered like diamonds against the dark sky as Ibrahim Traoré, leader of Burkina Faso, walked through the cobblestone streets of Marais. He had deliberately chosen to dine alone this evening, away from the diplomatic protocols and security details that usually surrounded him. This was supposed to be his one night of freedom during an otherwise tightly scheduled state visit to France. Litic, a discreet restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the 6th arrondissement, seemed perfect for an evening of solitude. The maitre d' led him to a corner table, and as he settled in with the evening's menu, Ibrahim felt a rare moment of peace wash over him. Tomorrow would bring difficult negotiations with French officials about mining rights and military cooperation, but tonight was his. He ordered a glass of Bordeaux and was studying the wine's deep red color when he felt eyes upon him. Looking up, his breath caught in his throat. At a table across the dining room sat a woman with auburn hair cascading over her shoulders, her green eyes fixed directly on him. Even after 15 years, he would recognize that face anywhere. Marianne Dubois, his first love. The woman who had captured his heart when he was a young military officer studying at Sancerre Military Academy. The woman he had planned to marry before. Duty and circumstances tore them apart. She stood gracefully, her movement fluid and confident, and approached his table. She wore an elegant black dress that accentuated her figure and a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire restaurant. "Ibrahim," she said, her voice carrying that familiar melodic quality that had haunted his dreams for years. "Mon Dieu, is it really you?" He rose from his chair, his diplomatic training momentarily forgotten as raw emotion took over. "Marianne, I can't believe it. What are the chances?" She laughed. That same musical laugh he remembered from their walks along the Seine during his student years. "May I?" She gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please," he said, pulling out the chair for her like a gentleman, his heart racing as her familiar perfume, jasmine and vanilla, brought back a flood of memories. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, simply taking in the reality of this unexpected reunion. Marianne's eyes sparkled with what appeared to be genuine joy and nostalgia. "I have followed your career," she said, leaning forward slightly. "From that young military officer I knew to Mr. President. I am so proud of what you have accomplished for your people." Ibrahim felt warmth spread through his chest. "You always believed I could make a difference, even when I doubted myself." "Do you remember?" Marianne said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "That night before you returned to Africa, we sat by the river, and you told me about your dreams for your country, about wanting to free your people from the chains of economic colonialism." "I remember," he said softly. "You told me I was crazy to think one person could change anything." "I was wrong," she said, her grip tightening slightly on his hand. "You proved that one person can change everything. The mining nationalizations, the currency independence, standing up to Western powers, it's exactly what you dreamed of doing." The waiter approached, and Marianne ordered wine with perfect French pronunciation. As they waited for her glass to arrive, she asked about his security detail, his schedule, his accommodations, questions that seemed natural coming from an old friend catching up. "Are you staying at the George Five?" she asked casually. "The Bristol, actually," he replied, though something in the back of his mind registered the specificity of her question. "And tomorrow, I imagine you have meetings at the Élysée?" "Among other places," he said, being deliberately vague, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Their conversation flowed naturally as they shared appetizers and reminisced about their time together. Marianne told him about her work in international consulting, a vague description that she glossed over quickly before steering the conversation back to him. "Do you ever think about us?" she asked, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. About what might have been if circumstances had been different. Ibrahim felt his resolve wavering. More than I should, he admitted, especially when the weight of leadership becomes overwhelming. I think about simpler times, when the biggest decision was which cafe to visit. Marianne smiled, but Ibrahim caught something in her expression, a flicker of something that didn't match the warmth in her voice. It was there and gone so quickly, he almost thought he had imagined it. Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and Ibrahim noticed her face changed subtly. The soft, nostalgic expression hardened for just a moment before she caught herself. "Excuse me," she said, picking up the phone. Ibrahim couldn't help but notice the screen as she lifted it. The message read, "Target located. Begin operation." His blood turned to ice, but his diplomatic training kicked in immediately. He kept his expression neutral, even managed to smile as Marianne read the message and quickly put the phone away. "Work never stops," she said with an apologetic shrug. But Ibrahim noticed her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her wine. "Glass. I understand completely," he said, though his mind was now racing. "Target located. Operation begin." The phrases echoed in his head as he tried to process what he had just seen. Everything started to make sense with terrifying clarity. The coincidental meeting at this specific restaurant, her detailed questions about his security and schedule, the way she had steered the conversation to extract information. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a carefully orchestrated operation, but he gave no outward sign of his realization. Instead, he leaned forward with apparent interest. "Tell me more about your work. International consulting sounds fascinating." "Oh, it's quite boring, really," Marianne said. But Ibrahim noticed she avoided eye contact. "Mostly helping companies navigate foreign markets, cultural differences, that sort of thing." "Which companies?" he pressed gently. "Various ones," she said vaguely. "Nothing you would find interesting, I'm sure." The waiter brought their main courses, giving Ibrahim time to think. If Marianne was part of an operation against him, who was behind it? The French government? A private intelligence firm? Corporate interests threatened by his policies? He decided to test her further. "You know, seeing you again makes me realize how lonely this job can be," he said, allowing vulnerability to enter his voice. "There are so few people I can trust completely." Her eyes lit up with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "I understand. Power must be isolating." "It is," he continued. "Even my security detail. I never know if I can completely trust their loyalty. Money talks, as they say." He watched carefully for her reaction. If she was gathering intelligence, this was valuable information. Sure enough, he saw her absorb this detail with particular interest. "That must be frightening," she said, "knowing that those closest to you might be compromised." "Indeed. Which is why tonight feels so precious. Being with someone who knew me before all of this, who has no agenda." The irony of his words wasn't lost on him, but he needed to understand the scope of whatever operation was unfolding. As they finished their meal, Marianne suggested they continue their reunion somewhere more private. "My hotel has a lovely bar," she offered. "We could talk more freely there." "Actually," Ibrahim said, making a calculated decision, "why don't you come to my suite like old times? We can open a bottle of champagne and watch the city lights." For just a moment, he saw something flash in her eyes. Triumph, perhaps. But she quickly masked it with apparent delight. "I would love that," she said softly. They shared a taxi back to the Bristol, and Ibrahim used the journey to observe her more carefully. She was clearly fit, more so than would be expected from someone doing desk work in international consulting. Her handbag, while stylish, was positioned in a way that suggested quick access to its contents, small details that painted a picture of someone with operational training. At the hotel, Ibrahim led her to his suite on the 7th floor. The panoramic view of Paris stretched out before them, the Eiffel Tower illuminated against the night sky. "It's beautiful," Marianne breathed, standing at the window. "Not as beautiful as you," Ibrahim said, moving to stand behind her. He meant it. Even knowing what he suspected about her true purpose, she was still the woman who had captured his heart all those years ago. She turned in his arms, and for a moment the years melted away. They were young again, full of dreams and possibilities. She kissed him softly, and he tasted the wine on her lips, mixed with something else. Was it guilt? "I'll open the champagne," she offered, moving toward the bottle he had ordered from room service. "Perfect," he said. But as she worked with the bottle, he noticed her reaching into her purse. A small vial, barely visible, appeared in her palm. He moved quickly but silently, positioning himself where he could see her actions clearly. She was adding something to one of the champagne flutes, a clear liquid that dissolved instantly. His heart broke and hardened simultaneously. The woman he had loved, had never forgotten, was attempting to drug him, or worse. But he said nothing. Instead, when she turned with the glasses, he smiled warmly. "Two unexpected reunions," he said, raising his glass. "Two second chances," she replied, her voice thick with emotion that now seemed entirely calculated. He pretended to drink while actually spilling most of the champagne onto the carpet behind him. Marianne, he noticed, barely touched her own glass. "This brings back so many memories," she said, settling onto the sofa and patting the cushion beside her. "Do you remember our last night together? You were so passionate about changing the world." "I was naive then," he said, sitting beside her but maintaining some distance. "I thought idealism was enough. And now? Now I know that naivety can be dangerous, that people aren't always who they seem to be, that even love can be weaponized." Something in his tone made her look at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Ibrahim stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "I mean that 15 years is a long time, Marianne. People change, priorities shift. Sometimes the person you thought you knew becomes someone entirely different." "Ibrahim, what are you trying to say?" He turned to face her, and now his expression was entirely different. Gone was the nostalgic lover, replaced by the steel-eyed leader who had faced down Western powers and survived multiple assassination attempts. "I'm saying that I know who you really are, Agent Dubois." The transformation in Marianne was immediate and complete. The soft, romantic woman vanished, replaced by a cold professional. Her posture shifted, becoming more alert and dangerous. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her hand had moved instinctively toward her purse. Ibrahim reached into his jacket and withdrew her DGSE identification card. "You dropped this when you were adding something to my champagne," he lied smoothly. In reality, his security team had been monitoring the restaurant and had identified her the moment she approached his table. Marianne's eyes widened, then narrowed. "How? Long have you known?" "The moment I saw that message on your phone," he said. "Though I suspected something was off from the beginning. You were always a terrible liar, even when we were young." She laughed bitterly. "You always were too smart for your own good. 15 years, Marianne. Were you assigned to me from the beginning? Was any of it real?" For the first time since her mask had dropped, he saw genuine emotion cross her face. "It was real," she said, quietly. "At first, then orders changed. Priorities shifted." "And you chose your career over..." "Over what?" she snapped. "Over following you to Africa? To live in poverty while you chased impossible dreams? I chose reality, Ibrahim. I chose a future. You chose to betray everything we meant to each other. I chose to serve my country," she said, standing and backing toward the door. "Just like you serve yours. My country doesn't ask me to poison former lovers." Marianne's hand was now fully in her purse, gripping what Ibrahim assumed was a weapon. "You don't understand the bigger picture, Ibrahim. Your policies, Your resource nationalizations, your defiance of Western interests, your destabilizing an entire economic system. A system that has kept my people in poverty for generations. A system that maintains global stability. Stability for whom? For French mining companies? For shareholders in Paris and London? While children in Burkina Faso go hungry? You're being naive again, she said. This is bigger than your little African country. You're threatening relationships that have existed for decades. Economic. Arrangements that benefit everyone. Everyone except my people. The argument was interrupted by a knock at the door. Ibrahim's security detail entered, having been monitoring the situation from the adjoining room. Agent Dubois, said Colonel Sawado, head of Ibrahim's personal security. You are under arrest for attempted assassination of a head of state. Marianne's shoulders sagged as she realized she was surrounded. She removed her hand from her purse. Empty. What was in the champagne? Ibrahim asked. Nothing fatal, she said. A sedative. The plan was to extract information while you were unconscious, then stage it as a heart attack brought on by stress. Whose plan? She remained silent. Ibrahim approached her one final time. Marianne, we loved each other once. That has to count for something. Tell me who's behind this. She looked at him with eyes full of sadness and regret. There are forces at work that are bigger than both of us, Ibrahim. Corporate interests, government agencies, international networks that profit from the current system. Your success threatens all of that. Give me names. She shook her head. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. The operation was compartmentalized. I only knew my part. As the security team prepared to escort her out, Marianne turned back to Ibrahim one last time. I want you to know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, that what we had was real, at least for me. And I'm sorry it ended this way. Ibrahim felt his heart break all over again. So am I. After she was gone, Ibrahim stood alone in his suite, looking out at the lights of Paris. The woman he had never forgotten, who had shaped. His understanding of love and trust had returned to his life as an instrument of betrayal. But perhaps, he reflected, this was the final lesson he needed to learn as a leader, that in the world of international politics, even the most intimate, relationships could be weaponized, that his enemies would use every tool at their disposal, including his own memories and emotions. The next morning, Ibrahim met with French President Macron at the Élysée Palace, the attempted assassination having been quietly covered up to avoid diplomatic embarrassment. But Ibrahim negotiated from a position of strength, knowing that he had survived not just a physical attack, but an assault on his very soul. As his plane lifted off from Charles de Gaulle Airport, Ibrahim thought about Marianne one last time. Somewhere in Paris she was likely being debriefed, or perhaps already on assignment elsewhere. The woman he had loved was gone, had perhaps never really existed at all. But he was stronger for having survived her betrayal and more determined than ever to protect his people from those who would use any means necessary to maintain their control over Africa's wealth. The personal had become political, and the political had become personal. But Ibrahim Traoré would endure, as he always had, carrying the scars of betrayal as reminders of the price of leadership and the cost of standing up to those who profit from Africa's pain.